Today on the Hobby Bench, I'll be painting up Culvert terrain for Marvel Crisis Protocol. Now, previously I've talked about some baton toys that I picked up for Marvel Crisis Protocol and using those, and I really wanted to get something that would fit out for a construction site. So in addition to that, I wanted to get some smaller terrain that probably would fit a little bit better in that theme, and ended up picking up some old PVC pipes and painting up to look like concrete culverts. And they're a good size. If you look up a dumpster here, it's pretty equivalent to them in the height, and maybe it's a little bit longer. I would generally say it's about a size 2 if I was going to put it out on the tabletop and using that. And so picked up a couple of these and assembled them, painted them, and I really like the way they look. They look like they fit perfect for a construction site. Now I'm using 3/4 inch PVC pipe. And I'm also using T-joints for them. Part of this is because if you just have the pipe itself, you're gonna have to put something underneath it to keep it from rolling around. And so I like using these T-joints. It just keeps it pretty solid, keeps it pretty steady. And we're using, of course, a little bit of cement to go ahead and join those pipes and make sure that they stay together. I want to say, though, that you're going to have to do a little bit more work on those two things. One, you're going to have some printing on the side, some raised bits that are going to need to be trimmed down. So you're going to be using just a craft knife for that. Don't have to be very careful at all. You just want to get most of that a little flush. And don't really fret about it being perfect, because you're going to see in a moment what we're going to go over this then is using some sandpaper. And this is really important, I think, more on the T-joint itself, because it's got a very smooth finish. So you want to try to add a little bit more texture to that. Dry brushing alone, I don't think is really going to cover it. You want to have a little bit of detail that is maybe something that dry brushing can adhere to. So that's why we're going to go ahead and sand it. Now, you'll probably be a little bit more rougher maybe on this plastic that you'll be using on the T-joints themselves, because it's a bit harder, it's a bit glossier. And so you can really work your way into it and using that pretty well, using that sandpaper. But I recommend for the longer section of the pipe, usually it's a little bit softer than that. So you want to be a little gentler, not be so rough, but still end up with some texture that can be picked out through dry brushing. Now I've gone and given this a coat of gray primer, just pretty basic, and I give it a tiny bit of texture by doing some dry brushing. And I'm just going to be using a simple craft paint, a lighter gray. And now you might be tempted just to go ahead and just throw it down the table as is, but you want to put some effort into this. Nothing too fancy. And I realize some dry brushing just gives it a bit of depth that you probably would want to have, just to make it stand out a little bit more. So you're going to be going over this, and as you can see, just giving it a quick dry brush, nothing too fancy. Now obviously you can go a lot more effort into this. You can put in some weathering and maybe even a couple of coats of dry brushing, probably something maybe a little bit even lighter gray, add far more depth to that than probably what I'm doing here. I am a little lazy, I just want to make this like good enough for the tabletop. But if you just go through and give it a fair coat of dry brushing here, just to go over the model, try to pick out longer sections of that, and definitely around the edges, going back and covering those pretty well. That can add quite a bit to it and just give it a little more life than you normally would just by just having this primed gray. This isn't fancy, this isn't going to win any awards, but after all, I was looking at it, that this is just going to be a piece of terrain. But in the end, I think it looks pretty cool. I think these look great. It's something that's going to be different and a functional piece of terrain. I think it's perfect for the tabletop and great for your Marvel Crisis Protocol games, especially if you want to have something look like a construction site.